Okay, so you know from watching the previous video or from reading the chapter that we have these rules, and the purpose of having those rules is so that we can put together proofs. And so I'll begin to show you how we do that in this video, and I'll use these three examples. So these are three arguments, and you probably recognize this from doing truth tables. So you'll recall that the turnstile separates the premise or premises from the conclusion. So in this first argument, we have one premise, P and R in parentheses, and T, and then our conclusion is R. So we'll start with that one. Okay, so when we're creating a proof, basically we're going to end up with a list. And so we begin by putting the premises at the beginning. So in this case, we just have the one premise. And so we put that on line 1. We indicate that it's a premise by writing PR at the far right side of the line. And Carnap requires that we separate what we have on a line from whatever we're writing over here on the far right with a colon. So we'll just include that there. Although technically you don't need it if you're writing. Okay, and then also we need to put a line under the premise. Okay, so this is how we begin. Now, in order to get to our conclusion, R, we need to use one or more of our rules. And I've written the rule that we need to use over here, and I've put it in this way to show or to emphasize that what we're really interested in when we use the rules, that is, when we do proofs, are these patterns. So the idea for conjunction elimination is we have two things that are combined with an ampersand. They can be individual letters or they can be longer expressions, but the ampersand is the main logical operator that's holding them together. Okay, so if we have this set up, then the conjunction elimination rule lets us take what's on one side of the ampersand, actually either side of the ampersand, and put it on a new line. So we have this and this, then we can put what's on the left side of the ampersand on a new line, or we can put what's on the right side of the ampersand on a new line. Either one. That's what the conjunction elimination rule lets us do. And whenever we do that, we need to, at the far right, indicate that we use the conjunction elimination rule by putting ampersand E and then the line number for wherever this original expression was. Okay, so that's what we want to do here. Again, we want to match the pattern that's in the rule with what we have in our proof. So this is our main logical operator, a ampersand. And so that means we can put what's on the left side of the ampersand on a new line. Let's see, lost a parentheses there. Okay. And we'll number that as line 2. And we can actually do both, put what's on the right side, on a new line. Okay, in both cases, we've used conjunction elimination, and we've applied that rule to line 1. Okay, now on line 2, the main logical operator is this ampersand here, so that means again we can do conjunction elimination, and now we can take either what's on the left side or the right side of this ampersand and put it on line 4. Okay, again, we can do both, but you may have noticed that our goal is to get R, and we have R here on the right side, so that's actually the only one that we need. Okay, so we do that. Ampersand elim, or conjunction elim, line 2. Okay, so that R came from line 2. We applied the conjunction elimination rule to line 2, so we need a 2 here. All right, and let me just say, so we did this line, what we have on line 3, the t, we didn't actually need to do that. We were allowed to do it. Carnap will accept it, but it's not really a necessary step because it didn't help us get to our conclusion. So it's fine to put extra steps in as long as they're things that we're allowed to do, but extra steps aren't necessary. Okay, next, we have this argument here. Now in this case, our premise is S, and this whole long thing here is our conclusion, R or S or P. Okay, but we start the same way. Put our premise, indicate that it's a premise. Okay, we put a vertical line to the left of our premise, and then a line under our premise. Okay, now the rule that we're going to use here is disjunction intro. And so again, we can just think of this as a pattern. In this case, we have something on a line. We repeat that something, add a wedge, and then we can add anything else. And in both cases, these two things on either side of the wedge can be single letters or they can be something longer. Okay, so over here, what we're going to need to do in order to get this conclusion is introduce two wedges. And the first one we're going to do is this wedge here. So we will take our S, put it on a new line, add a wedge, and then we can add anything we want. So we're going to add P. Disjunction intro. The S that we copy and pasted is from line 1, and so we indicate that we applied the disjunction introduction rule to line 1. All right, next we want to do the same thing, only this time we're taking what we have on line 2, we're copying it, we're going to put it in parentheses because that's a unit, and we want to add the wedge to this entire unit. So we put and in this case, we're going to put the wedge before the S or P, and we're going to add an R. That's our conclusion, so that's what we want to do. Again, wedge intro. This time, we applied disjunction introduction to what we have on line 2, so we'll put a 2 there. All right, now the third one that I'm going to show you is a little more difficult than what you'll be doing initially. In a week or 10 days, this won't seem difficult, but it's a little more complex than the two I just showed you. So in this case, we have two premises. This is our first premise, this is our second premise, and our conclusion is Q. All right, so we list our premises. Each premise will go on a different line, and we put the horizontal line after the last premise. Both premises are labeled with PR. Okay, now what do we want to do? So one thing to think about when you're getting into problems like this that are a little bit more difficult is where the conclusion is in the premises that you're given. So our conclusion is Q, and that's right there. So the question is, how are we going to get Q on a line by itself? Now, of course, this Q is part of a conditional. So this arrow for the first premise is the main logical operator. And we have a rule for working with arrows, the conditional elimination rule. And this rule, again, if we're just looking at the pattern, the rule works like this. We have a conditional on one line. On another line, we need to have the antecedent by itself. If we have those two things, then we can take the consequent and put it on a new line. And we indicate that we use conditional elim with arrow E and both of those line numbers, the one where the conditional is and the one where the antecedent is. All right, so in our conditional over here, we have P and R is the antecedent. So in order to use the conditional elimination rule and get Q by itself, we would need to have P and R on a line by themselves. Okay, and so we don't have that right now, but that's our first goal, is getting that. If we get that, then we know that we can get Q. All right, so we have to turn to line 2, P and T and R. Okay, so again, we're going to use conjunction elimination, which lets us take what's on the left side of the ampersand, I should say. So in this case, that ampersand there is the main logical operator. So we can take what's on the left of that ampersand, or we can take what's on the right side of that ampersand, or we can do both, and put them on new lines. Okay, next, now on line 3, this ampersand is the main logical operator, and so that means we can take what's on the left side and put it on a new line. That will be conjunction elim 3. We also could do the same with the T, but I'm going to skip that because we don't need it. Now that we have R on line 4 and P on line 5, we want to think about another rule, the conjunction introduction rule. So this rule, actually let me get rid of this. The pattern for this rule is basically this. You have something on one line, you can repeat it, add an ampersand, introduce an ampersand, take something on another line, put it after the ampersand. Okay, that's conjunction intro, and we have to give both of the line numbers where the two original sentences are, and these can be in either order. These two can be in either order. Okay, so that pattern we want to apply to our proof. So here on line 4, we have R. On line 5, we have P. And again, what we're thinking about is how to get this antecedent of the conditional on line 1. So we'll take our P, add an ampersand, and then add the R from line 4 to that. That's conjunction intro, and we give those two lines, 4 and 5. Now we do have the antecedent of the conditional on line 1, so that means on line 7, we can take the consequent and put it there. Arrow elim, conditional elim, lines 1, that's where the conditional is, and line 6, that's where the antecedent is. So it's 1 and 6. Okay, and so now we have our conclusion, and so we're done.